I think to get to the core of the issue, you nailed it with the word distracted, because that's really what these kinds of engagement pods, I think, end up doing to you, is like distracting you from other things that could be serving your business better, you know?
Yeah. It's crazy because I have to vent, because some indies, they're like, oh, I have to learn Facebook ads and I have to learn these things and I have to have email and I got to like put all these different things together. But then the number of hours they spend like trying to find playlist curators on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, I'm like, dude, that amount of time, you probably could have built like 5 email campaigns and a sales page and launched your album, and it's just, I'm just like, I don't understand, where the disconnect is there, but really your time is valuable. Really try to spend it on stuff that works.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I am Corinne Campbell. With me is Jack McCarthy, and we are excited to talk about some really cool things today, engagement pods that actually work. And I'm going to start it off by saying engagement pods suck, and you shouldn't do them unless it's what we're talking about in this episode. Just in case anybody was like, oh, what cool engagement pod thing are they going to be telling me? We actually have more to tell you. But before we dig in, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew this podcast will be airing on roughly November 24th, 25th-ish. If you've never signed up for Indie Pro, I know we talk about it all the time. All of our trainings are centered around the things that we talk about on this podcast every week. And if you haven't tried Indie Pro, you really should. And there's an incentive. If you're hearing this before the end of the day, I'm assuming Eastern time, because that's where Circa is, before end of day on Thursday, the 26th of 2020, we are doing our first ever free trial of Indie Pro. We've never done this, not in ads, not open. We've never done this. It's a 7-day free trial. And I think it's a great way to figure out if we're full of crap or not. So if you're listening to this before that time and you haven't gone and done that, please go do that, because I would love to put our money where our mouth is, and for you to see it free. So of course, this is only valid for new people. If you've already been in Indie Pro, you don't need that 7 days. You already know it's hot, right?
That's right. This is exciting.
Yeah.
We've never done this before. I'm so stoked about it. I think this was a great way to lead up into all of the Black Friday holiday madness. Just a cool way to give people a little something. Try us out. Take a chance.
Totally. And if you have been Indie Pro before, don't worry. We got some cool stuff coming for you for Black Friday as well. Just be patient. It's in a couple of days, so you'll see it soon. But now that that's out of the way, just want to make sure you didn't miss that. Got to put it right at the top. But, so today we're going to be talking about engagement pods that actually work. And this is not your typical Spotify playlist engagement pod, Instagram engagement pod. I don't want to spend too much time talking about why those things don't work, but I do think we'd be remiss if we did not kind of address that, because it is something that runs rampant in the indie music community, and it's something that breaks our heart every time we see it. And so I wanted to address it. I mean, I want to know what you think, Jack, but I feel like the ones that I see the most are Spotify kind of engagement pods, where it's like, I'll make a playlist and then I'll put your music on it, and then you make a playlist and put my music on it, and we'll listen to each other, Yeah, and then there's Instagram as well, where it's like musicians are like, I'll post and you like it and comment, and then I'll comment. And like, that's kind of what these things are, tit for tat situations, where we're trying to spoof the algorithm or spoof, some social proof. So anyway, Jack, I mean, obviously I feel like you may agree with me, but if I'm wrong, tell me.
No, you're not wrong. And I'm excited about this episode because we're pulling a little bit of a fast one on you guys here.
Right.
Call it clickbait if you want. But I feel like this is a pretty badass way to kick off the episode because, yeah, I mean, the two types of engagement pods that I hear people talk about, and I mean, hey, I'll be honest with you. Like long ago, I was guilty of being in some engagement pods. So, you know what? So, and I'm talking like way back when IG first started. There was definitely some whisperings, and I was involved in some engagement pods at one point or another. But
I never did. It's like I say about a lot of things in my marketing my own music journey. Like I never bought into the hype.
Well, good. You're
lucky
smarter.
me.
You're smarter for it. You're better for it.
It's not smart. It's not smart. It just my brain didn't process it as something valuable to engage in.
And it's really not. I mean, like let's just start here unpacking why it doesn't work. And I want to rip the Band-Aid off with Instagram engagement pods, which is often a big one that's, talked about. That's kind of where I've seen a lot of the discussions, and I've been involved in those in the past. Here's why they don't work. I mean, for one, like people don't hold up their end of the bargain. Like I'm going to be completely honest with you, like the tit for tat BS, it doesn't work. I've been in, pods with, 20, 30 people, and for the most part, it ends up being a group DM or whatever with a thread of messages that just don't get responded to, posts that don't get interaction, for whatever reason. And, one person might spearhead the whole thing and they kind of kick it off and reap the quote unquote benefits of what's happening. And then from there, it just sort of dies down. So from like a human groupthink perspective, they don't work for that reason. The reciprocity just never seems to be there.
Right.
At least in my experience. But from like a technical perspective, like when it comes to like the algorithmic so-called push that these give you, is that they really don't help you all that much. And in reality, if you're joining an engagement pod with a bunch of your artist friends, you're not helping yourself algorithmically to organically find your fans through the engagement that you're getting. And that's really, that's really the big issue here is you're teaching, quote unquote, the algorithm to look for essentially people that just look like you or look like your artist friends and not your fans. And that's why, not to get too long-winded about it, but that's why these things don't work.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is really similar to things that we've talked about in the past where you're, looking at Facebook page likes and whether you should advertise to likes, right? And we've said like, well, the people who probably liked your profile from the get are your friends and family because you asked them to, which may not look like your fans, right? So, there's obviously a compromise of some data happening there for the algorithm, for the machine to figure out who's actually going to be interested in your stuff. I think that's, I don't know. I never bought into it, but I do understand why people thought it might be something. But again, this is not a trigger. You're not going to blow up. This isn't a magic button. And in the end, it just kind of, like Jack said, it tends to die off. People want the benefit for them, but don't necessarily want to give back. Unfortunately, we're human and those are the things that happen. But also it's just kind of messing up delivery to the people who actually want to see your stuff. Contrary to what you may think, somebody commenting on your stuff who's another musician does not necessarily, it's not one-to-one like, oh, there's a comment on this post, we need to share it with more people. That's not really how the machine works. It's looking at the interests of those people. It's looking at the inventory for those people. The follow back strategy. I don't believe in that either. I never really have. And so these are the kinds of things where it's like, if you're trying to trick a machine that is billions of times smarter than all humans combined, then you're probably not going to win. And it probably is a faulty strategy. So, and that applies going into Spotify stuff too, right? And gosh, the number of people trying to game Spotify, I mean, it's exhausting, right? And if you are a musician and you're looking to people who are like, no, I got this thing. I figured it out. Like, I know it's so tempting to, to get involved with that. Spotify is just a huge goal for, so many musicians, and whether or not that's my goal doesn't really matter, right? Like, most of the community is concerned with their Spotify numbers. But, putting your stuff on another musician's playlist and they put it on yours and then mixing it with these big artists. I mean, it's really, it's just not finding the right people, right? Especially if they're not truly fans of your music. If they're truly fans of your music and, are going to listen to it, tight,
Yeah.
But if they're not, which is going to be most of the time in these kinds of pods, like, I just think you're really risking getting distracted by something that doesn't work instead of, focusing down on something that is proven and that does work and finds the right people. So
I think to get to the core of the issue, you nailed it with the word distracted, because that's really what these kinds of engagement pods, I think, end up doing to you, is like distracting you from other things that could be serving your business better, you know?
Yeah. It's crazy because I have to vent, because some indies, they're like, oh, I have to learn Facebook ads and I have to learn these things and I have to have email and I got to like put all these different things together. But then the number of hours they spend like trying to find playlist curators on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, I'm like, dude, that amount of time, you probably could have built like 5 email campaigns and a sales page and launched your album, And it's just, I'm just like, I don't understand, where the disconnect is there. But, really, your time is valuable. Really try to spend it on stuff that works. So now that we've taken a hit against engagement pods and broken all the dreams into smithereens,
Hopefully.
I'm rhyming. Yeah, I'm rhyming. It's the holiday season if you create poets and don't know it. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, now that we've kind of crushed that, hopefully not in a painful way, let's talk about engagement pods that do work, right? And this isn't actually engagement pods. We're obviously being a little fluid with the term, but there are ways that within the community you can continue to support each other, but not through these fake vanity metric kind of ways. And I think that's what we're here to talk about, especially going into the holidays and, there's a lot of love in the air. And so it's a great time to embrace how musicians can assist each other, because we're all working super heavy to make things happen for our music, and we all have different skills and strengths. And yeah, so I'd like you to kick it off, Jack, because I know you've got all kinds of ideas.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about engagement pods that do work. And I think that, zooming out, this is not a new idea to any kind of business, but it might be a little bit newer to indies. Maybe it's something that you haven't thought about, is like, having a core group of people in your circle that you kind of rely on each other and you lean on each other for business accountability, keeping each other accountable to the goals that you're working on, whether that be related to your marketing, whether that be related to a release, whether it be just related to songwriting or producing, whatever it could be. These are the kinds of things that are, super common when it comes to businesses. And I think indies would be really wise to adopt this kind of practice especially going into a new year. It's time to turn over a new leaf. If you found yourself feeling stuck or unmotivated and just kind of like, well, shoot, I'm just kind of sitting around in the afternoon, not really working on anything, feeling distracted and unmotivated, and every other negative word that you could apply to your work ethic. It might be time to consider, who are the people in my circle that inspire me, and how could we help each other? How can we lift each other up?
Right.
And I think that that's really important. Some of the most helpful things that I've done for myself over the years as a business person has been getting involved in things like, networking groups. It sounds gross, but honestly, like I've met people that have kept me super accountable to myself and to the goals that I've set. across the board, not just for music, for business in general. And I think that that's just, it's really, really helpful to find those kinds of people and start to develop a plan to, lean on each other and work off each other, kick ideas around.
Right.
We kind of work this way unofficially, I think, inside of Indepreneur too, like cheering each other on with our own music, and the projects that we're working on, and, giving each other ideas. Yeah. And I think that it's really, really helpful. So, I think as a step one kind of point is like, think about the people kind of in your world, whether it's acquaintances or close friends or collaborators, how you could, put together a plan to hold each other accountable to your goals. Starting there, list out the things that you want to do together and say like, okay, what kind of timeline are we working with here to do these things? I know Circa and Jonah Dukes are kind of in the process of doing this together right now.
Yeah, I know that they're doing that for their music, right? Which is actually really cool, because even with Indepreneur, like going into this Black Friday, like monstrosity that's happening, I had 4 different things happening for Indie Founder for Black Friday. And I knew that I could lean on Jesse for some things. I knew that I could bounce things off of Jack, and the whole team was helping me stay accountable for these things that needed to launch. So, I mean, really, you can think about it in a couple ways, right? Like, this applies to music in the same way, where someone, you set your goals and someone else has their goals, and your goals don't have to be the same for this to work. But whether it's releasing music or producing music or, getting things in your tech stack set up, or, whatever it is that you're trying to dedicate yourself to, but, perhaps you are procrastinating, which I could definitely use an accountability partner in that department.
Guilty as charged.
Exactly.
Me too.
Yeah. So it's definitely, having someone there to kind of kick your butt, especially if you're kicking their butt, in return, on separate things like that, you have this collaborative relationship, right? And that's at a peer level. There's also mentorship. And, it can be hard sometimes to feel like asking someone for their help is, you might feel like that's not okay, or that, they don't have time or whatever. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And I've been shocked, actually, just in the last, few years of my life, I've gotten more confident with that, and, asked people who, work at Billboard for some of their advice, or, a friend who works at Nielsen, and ask for their advice, and so sometimes you really just have to kind of put yourself out there, and open with, hey, I know you may not have time, but I could really use some insights if you are willing to, kind of help me with this. And, just put it out there, right? I mean, they can say no and don't be mad, So there's a mentorship there. You can also, obviously the Indepreneur community is super helpful with each other, and are really open to having discussions. And I know, especially from Indie Founder, there are a lot of classes who, even after the official Facebook group for that session is closed, they still create their own little pod of accountability and, bouncing ideas off of each other. Yeah. I mean, it's really great to see. So it can be very helpful to be seeking someone out to, help you just with that general accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the point you made about mentorship. And I know that can be a daunting thing to step over or ask a question to somebody who, you think is ahead of you, so to speak, maybe not above you, but ahead of you. That can be scary. So if I can offer one piece of advice, if you're considering, approaching somebody and wanting to ask them some questions or maybe get some helpful advice, is go in with like a specific idea of, a specific question or two that you have. That way you're not being like, can I just pick your brain? Because as someone whose brain, as someone whose brain has been picked quite a bit, and I don't mind, and I certainly don't fault anybody for asking that question. it comes off really harmless, but when you hear it time and time again, it also comes off really unprepared. Like, I think having a specific intention has always been really helpful for me when I ask, someone who I kind of look up to for, their thoughts on something. I would come in with a question about, like, I don't know, like Facebook ads. Let's just use that as a stupid example.
That's stupid.
Or production. I've certainly asked plenty of production related questions over the years. Same kind of thing, like having a specific question or a specific topic that you want to chat about, or that you've got a burning question about. I think that's a really good place to start, and it often opens up the door for conversations about other things. And then that I think that's kind of where mentorship sort of kind of naturally evolves or naturally kicks off. Someone sees like that you're curious about something, or passionate about one thing, and it's like, oh, okay, well, like, I can help this person out with this question, but I can also offer them a lot more. So it almost, it encourages someone to engage with you a little bit further when you come in with like a set idea of what you're going to ask, rather than just like a vomiting of questions.
Yeah. Well, and from my experience with people picking my brain, let me take you out to coffee and pick your brain or whatever. Every time that happens, it's just, it doesn't really turn into many questions. It's not very focused, and it's usually like complaining about the indie music industry and how hard it is, which, just so if anyone's interested in picking my brain, just know that I am not sympathetic to that narrative. You don't want to sit down with me and try to talk about how hard everything is. But like Jack said, it really tends to be unfocused. And slowly, especially if you do that to someone too many times, it's going to be demotivating. It's going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't turn into a succinct conversation, and we just sit there for 2 hours. Also make sure that if you are asking someone for their time and advice, that you heed it. I think that's another thing I see, where it's like, oh, I'm going to ask you for all this advice. I'm going to take your time. And then I'm not going to implement anything that we talked about. I'm not going to give you any feedback. I'm not going to say like, look, you helped me with this thing and I made it, Those are the things that I think are frustrating for me when it comes to picking my brain.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I think that there's nothing more frustrating to someone who offers up advice upon someone asking them than to not have that advice taken or no action taken, Right. I don't necessarily care if you take my advice to the T. And I think most people would agree with that, but as long as you do something with it, just do something.
Right.
Jesse and I, Basic Printer, we've talked about this quite a bit because he's had a fair share of people asking to pick his brain. And again, like, he's just like a really like, just a genuinely good guy that wants to help people.
Yeah.
And we've had so many conversations where I've just been like, don't forget, like, protect your time.
Dude, seriously.
Because it can really turn into like an unfocused, inactionable sort of conversation.
Right. So if you are going to ask someone for their assistance, or, even if it's not even that they're mentoring you, but it's accountability, it's the same way that we're talking about engagement ponds in general, right? Like, don't waste their time. Don't abuse the fact that they're making themselves available to you. Give as much as you take. Like, I think those things are super important. And that's, we're not trying to get into relationship therapy here, because I know that's like all of humanity, but it is something that I feel is missed, and that's where those accountability partners start to sink away, and where that support starts to sink away if, it's not kind of equal giving between the two. And this is true even for mentorship, right? If someone's mentoring you and, you really feel like this is someone who knows more about most things than you do, still like check in with them or share what action you've taken against what they've, said, their advice. If they're like, oh, you should try this. If you do try it, share it with them. Like, that's how you can give back to someone who's more of a mentor kind of position for you. And another thing is that there are things that I know it's shocking, but there are things that I don't know. I know, it's unbelievable. There are so many things that I don't have a lot of experience with, or maybe it's just something I've not tried for my things, and I will totally hit people up. I mean, even it was probably 2 weeks ago, one of our former indie founder clients, which it was for Chase Walker, who is a really great artist, and his mother, Denise, is a ninja. I mean, when she came in, I wouldn't say that she was fluent in any of this by any means, but by the end, and then now seeing where she is, she has done so much. And Indie Founder was more of a one-on-one mentorship kind of situation before. And that was before we revamped because it wasn't scalable. We couldn't assist more people. But what Denise has done for herself has been incredible. And so there are actual things that she kind of has run to ground that I've never done. And so just 2 weeks ago, I was like, hey, what was this thing you were saying about whatever? And she helped me,
That's so cool.
Yeah. So I think there's always, when you're talking about whether it's music production or music marketing or songwriting or even instrumental skills, like there's always a way that you can trade off. There's no one that has a 100% skill match to you. And there's always going to be things that they know better or that you know better and that you can share with each other and elevate at the same time. So I think that's really something to look for is, what can I offer them and what would they be willing to make available to me? And that ends up being simpatico. It's a very good relationship at that point.
Yeah, it opens up opportunities for collaborations in ways that you might not have thought about, or even building teams, collective teams that are working on projects for each other together.
Right.
Maybe you've got somebody in a group with you that is really good at, I don't know, videography or post-production. And then you've got someone who's a great mixing engineer. And it's like, oh, well, we can help each other out. I know we've talked about this in other episodes on collaboration, but I think that this is something that people don't think about when they consider like accountability groups or whatever is like also skill sharing.
Right.
It can be a huge advantage, I think, especially when you've got like a powerhouse group of like creative people. All of a sudden it goes beyond just like, oh yeah, I've got like 3 people who are really good singers and guitarists. Like you probably have more talent in that pool than you know about.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and so that's when it gets, again, whether it's in your music stuff or it's in your marketing stuff, right? I've definitely seen indies trade share essentially, where it's like, yo, I'm a ninja at email or I'm a ninja at copy, but I suck at, setting up zaps or whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
There's different stuff like that where I've seen indies kind of trade, right? They trust each other. They give each other access to, these different tools and they help each other. Jack is constantly, he has access to my business manager. And sometimes if something is ridiculous in my ads, I'll be like, yo, Jack, what is happening here? Or sometimes I do think I know what's happening, but I just want that second eye. I'm like, I might be like, what am I missing? Is there something here I'm not seeing,
Check my smarts is the phrase that we use.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Check
all the
my
time.
Smart. Indeed. So yeah, I think those are the ways that you can literally share skills or share knowledge. But let's talk about accountability when it comes to goals, right? What your goals are for the month, the quarter, the year, whatever it is. Because I think that's something that, is a type of engagement pod, right? That works also.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you pivoted to this and kind of segued to this because I hope we didn't scare anybody off when talking about like, don't do this when talking to a mentor or don't do this when, collaborating.
Right.
I think the remedy to that, to those kind of warnings that we made in the beginning is is setting goals and kind of working to determine, okay, like what habits am I lacking in accomplishing my goals, and how can, and what, you know, my counterparts or my core people, what habits do they need to form, or what habits do they have? Maybe they need to break some, you never know.
Right. I know that would apply to me.
Yeah. And what can we work towards together? I think that identifying those, especially early on as you're trying to like set goals and planning to hit them, that kind of eliminates the concern for inaction, because then you've put something down on paper or on a Trello board or Asana or whatever, wherever you hold your goals.
Or a notepad.
Yeah, I like paper personally.
I'm that way too.
Yeah, but I think that that's kind of like the natural remedy for, you know, the things that can go wrong. And that's kind of the first place to start. So yeah, you know, putting things down on paper together and going over them and being like, all right, well, what can I accomplish? What's out of reach?
Right.
What do I need to do? What do I need to do to hit the benchmarks that I want to hit, and, you know, accomplish the things that I want to do? And how are you going to hold me accountable to doing it? And it kind of creates a little bit of healthy competition.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key word, right? Healthy. Because I do think that, especially in independent music, but in music in general, we're all very competitive, right? We all act like each person out there who likes music is only going to like my music and not their music. You know, if they like their music, that means they're not liking my music. And it's like, we all know factually that doesn't work that way. But I do feel like sometimes that's how people feel, you know? So it's kind of, it almost feels like maybe you should find the person you are most intimidated by and see if they want to do it with you, you know? Because they may be intimidated by you, and it's possible that you two will really, you know, sharpen each other, so to speak.
For sure. I think that's such good advice. It's like go after the big monster in your head, because you're probably going to find out that it's not a monster at all.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, that's so good.
So there's a lot of options for one-on-one, right? And I think something else that I've seen work really well, especially in the indie community, is kind of a group think. Right? Which can be a little different. And I think one way that to keep a group focused, it's a little bit more difficult if you're in a lot of different places, and that, you know, that's going to be a challenge. There are going to be lots of musicians who are in a lot of different places. But something I've seen indies do that has definitely been inspiring to me is they'll be like, okay, we're all going to be building our re-engagement series, right? Which is an email series that basically takes all of your people on your mailing list who have gone cold and tries to warm them back up. And, you know, this is a 3 email series. Typically, it's not something that takes a lot of time, and it's not something that you have to be in a little engagement group for more than, you know, maybe a few weeks if you want. But it does help, you know, if you're like, all right, these are the goals. This is kind of the timeline we're all setting, and we're going to do this together, and we're going to run it by each other. And, you know, if I get stuck, I know that you guys can help me through it. And then the goal is by the end of that, you know, kind of time, whatever that timeline is that you set, all of you will have this done, but also with the feedback of other people, so that you're not working in a tunnel, you know? And I love that idea. That's been really inspiring for me to see people do, is like, we're all working on this piece of tech or this part of my marketing, or, you know, that kind of thing. And then they do it all together. Yeah,
everyone loves a good challenge. And I think that that's kind of what it is. You know, it's like, okay, all right, gang, like we've got 4 weeks to accomplish this project that we want to go after. Mm-hmm. We're all going to work on it together. We're all going to cheer each other on, and we're going to cross the finish line together. We've got 4 weeks to do it. Ready, hike.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that that's so cool. I totally agree. Like, you know, setting it up, it's almost like a little pop-up group. I just think that that's fun, and it's encouraging. I definitely love that sort of structure.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing that's cool about groups too, is that I think we all set out to set our goals. And if you're anything like me, you put way too many goals, way too close to today. I'm literally involved in like 4 businesses right now, actually 5 as of 3 days ago. Obviously Indepreneur is my primary, my artistry is my secondary, but I am, also kind of helping in 3 other lines of business. And so, I really end up putting things in front of me that are like, no way am I going to get it done by then. And my Asana, which, if you use Asana, I'm sure you can empathize. If you don't use Asana, essentially there are lots and lots of tasks that all have due dates. And I keep my due dates turn red, and then I put them to tomorrow. This is an endless problem for me. And so in a group, especially if you're going after things together, it's really, it helps people be like, can you really finish that in that amount of time? Like, is that going to happen? Because if you're just by yourself, or even with you're just one other person, you may not really have a handle on, what kind of timeline you're looking at, whereas someone else in a group might have a little more insight. Maybe they've built something similar before, or they can weigh in on like, guys, we're not going to be able to do this in 1 week unless we do it full time, And I think that that's really helpful, because when you fall behind on your goals, and this is even just from my own experience, it can be very disheartening. You can be less motivated to try to attack them. So figuring out how to set reasonable goals for yourself that are actually accomplishable. I think that having accountability partners, and especially in a group, can really help you discern what is truly possible.
Yeah. And I think it allows you to also knowing, especially if you're with people that know your skill set, they can kind of help you to, identify the blind spots within yourself to say okay, I know you want to have that goal. I know you want to write a song every day, but historically you've written a song every month. So maybe you should just try to increase your frequency by, write a song every 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And not overshoot your goals. And, which people say, the kind of tired phrase, shoot for the moon, hit the stars, or whatever it is.
It's the other way.
It's the other way. Shoot for the stars, hit the moon. Yeah. I don't know if that necessarily applies.
Or you could do it the other way if you want,
Yeah.
That it's a similar trajectory, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if that necessarily applies to goal setting, because oftentimes what I see happen, or at least what happens within myself, is if you set goals that are far beyond your capabilities, and you don't have the support or the foresight to be like, I'm this is out of my reach. Mm-hmm. That's just going to get out of control. It's going to be out of your reach. And then you might just be disheartened, like you said, to even want to set new goals, or you just give up.
Right. Which
sucks.
Worst. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks. So I think having people around you that know your abilities, or at least have an idea of, what your history has been like when it comes to accomplishing things, it allows you to zoom out and break down your goals based on how you can hit them, weekly tasks, monthly goals, quarterly initiatives, however you want to look at it, year-long projects.
Yeah. So you're saying essentially, instead of shooting for the stars and hitting the moon, aiming for the moon, and then you end up hitting the stars after several moons.
Yeah. I guess I am saying that.
Yeah. So maybe that's why you didn't recognize the adage, is because your mind just processed that version instead.
It might be. I've definitely shifted to that kind of thinking,
right?
Especially over the past few years, kind of being in a similar spot to you, Corinne, where I'm working in multiple businesses. It can get really overwhelming really fast.
Totally.
And so I think that's an amazing part of working with a group and having people involved and collaborating, is having that group think, especially when it comes to setting goals and kind of goading each other on.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, it's funny because I recently became a client of IndieX because I needed help
Yes.
with my stuff. And for the record, I did not get special treatment. I applied and I waited on the wait list until a slot became available. And
there was a hell of a wait list. Thank you for being so patient.
Yeah, but I didn't just go to the front of the line, and I did a consult with Jack and I filled out my goals. And one of the things that is, especially experiencing it as a potential client of that application process is, the IndieX app that you fill out will ask you what your goals are. And, in theory, this would be your STARS goal, right? You have to get to the moon and to Mars and through Saturn and far beyond to get to the stars. There are steps, right? And IndieX is, in theory, kind of helping you figure out those benchmarks to get to those goals. And so, I'm also, I don't check them every day, but I also can see the IndieX applications. And sometimes the goals are like, blow up on Spotify. It's like, okay,
yeah,
we can't set benchmarks for that, And so sometimes, maybe your goal isn't that crazy undefined, but maybe you do have one that it's like, look, that's not close enough to where you currently are to break it into pieces, and that's one thing that has been kind of cool about working with IndieX so far is that it's like, okay, these are your goals. So we need to chunk it. So yeah, a group can keep you accountable to like, is what you're shooting for in whatever period of time you're considering, is this actually achievable in that amount of time? And how do you break it down into even more manageable chunks? And that, I think that's been helpful for me with IndieX. So I can only imagine how that would be, for people who are in a group doing it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like you can also, in working with other people, you can also sort of see, especially if you have a varied set of people working together, like artists who might have a little bit bigger of a fan base than you, or someone who's just starting out, and you've kind of got a mix of, career paths. It's like, okay, what can I learn from the person who is, a couple steps ahead? What can I learn about what they did to get there? How can I apply that to me? Not necessarily direct one-to-one like what they did, but more so, how did they pace themselves? What goals did they set to get there? And for someone who's, if you're looking and you're working with somebody who's just kicking off, maybe they're starting a new project, going from a band to a solo project or something like that. The amount of inspiration that you can get from that, I think, is even better, because it's like, okay, if I were in their shoes and I was starting with a clean slate, how would I do things, and how can I apply that to where I am right now?
Yeah.
I think it's a really cool thing to be able to do. I just love that.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I even experienced that, during some of my indie founder coaching sessions, where someone is coming up through, and I'm basically going back and revisiting things that I haven't looked at for myself in a long time,
Right.
Because sometimes you can be so focused on looking forward that you're not looking back enough to first off make sure that all of that is still steady, right? But that it's also how you would do it now, And so working with people who might be a few, not necessarily that they're steps behind you, but at least are in a place in the process that you've already kind of been through, it means that you can look back and be like, oh, and be inspired by whoever it is that you're working with, because they're going through that process right now. And it may influence you to re-examine where your things are in that whole kind of step-by-step process. So, I think that's something else that can be really helpful. And I know for me, there have been things where when founders were going through some process, like, going through Google Analytics, they'd be like, what is this? Like there's universal properties, and now there's GA4, which is a new Google Analytics platform. And I'm not even going to get into that right now. But basically what it did is it derailed some of the instructions in the ones and zeros training and alerted me to the fact that ones and zeros needs to be updated. But what it also did is it caused me to look at a feature that exists now that didn't when I was back there. And if that hadn't been brought to my attention, I wouldn't know what that is. And there are some distinct advantages to GA4. So now I can go back, learn about that, and be like, okay, so now I can implement that into my stuff, as well as sharing that information with everyone else. So, I don't think you're ever past revisiting everything that you've done, and sometimes working with groups can really trigger you to be like, yeah, maybe I'll go back and look at that right now and see how I would do that better or differently now that I know what I know.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that applies even to making your music, like I find myself going back to old records that I wrote or old songs that never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
And not doing it to laugh about them or be like, oh, listen to how much this sucked. Or even to be like, oh, look at how much I've grown from here. It's more so to look back and be like, oh shit, like there were some gems in this. And like, oh, listen to that guitar part. Like I could do something like that in a totally new way now, a couple years later or whatever. I think that you can sort of retro your old material in a way that's not looking down on it or necessarily viewing it from on high. More so, viewing it more as an outsider now that you're not in it as much, right, and see what you can learn from it.
Yeah, it's really easy to become kind of numbed, to the things that you feel like, okay, I did that, I'm done, check,
Yeah.
But we really should never be doing that. And so, yeah, I think that's where these accountability partners can really help you, realize what it is that you haven't revisited in a long time so that you can improve it. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think if you're listening to this and any of it is like resonating with you and it's like, okay, how do I get started? I would say like, we're getting into December. It's going to be 2021 soon. I would say like, identify a few people, like we said earlier, go after the monster that you're intimidated by, but also just look for a few people kind of in your circle, maybe acquaintances that you've talked to. If you hang out in either the indies group or the indie pro group, I'm sure you have people that you interact with in there, maybe more regularly than others. Maybe you have people that you chat with from time to time. Those kind of people are like the prime candidates for like, hey, like, do you want to like, help each other out and, push each other forward? I think like the best kinds of friendships can be made that way too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've certainly made a lot of really close friends through these kinds of groups.
Toiling together.
Yeah. Suffering.
Dude, you're talking to an Army vet who made lots of friends in basic training. Okay.
Yeah.
And in deployment and all of that.
Yeah.
It's like you bond together through the toiling.
Yeah. So I would say like, that's a really great place to start. And then, just looking from there, like laying out together, like, these are the things that I'm working on in my music business. These are the things that I have been working on. These are the things that I'm teeing up. Then talk about what's practical and then talk about, what you need from a process standpoint to get you where you want to go. And then from there, it's just writing it down, charting a path for each other and checking in.
Right. And if you feel like you don't know how to kind of get everybody in it in real time, I would say make a Facebook group. And just make sure you only have the 6 or however many of you in there, because then it's going to pop up in your feed, right? So there's some motivation there. You can have your notifications on if you want, to have kind of a more real-time experience with it. And you can also have chats in there and stuff. So that way you're not worrying about email and Google Meets and all these links and whatever. It's literally in one spot. And I think that's been really helpful. And you can always create a group and it's free and then you delete it. And if you don't want to do it anymore, if you start a new one or whatever it is. So that's a great way that you can coordinate with many people and not feel challenged to be doing it through Messenger or email or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeps it in one channel that, you don't have to scroll up right. in a group text message or something.
Yeah.
Keeps it nice and neat.
Exactly.
Facebook groups are really good for that. Pop-up groups.
Right.
It works super well.
Yeah. It's something even marketers are doing. I'm sure. Have you heard Molly Pittman's latest?
I'm actually in a couple of those types of groups with marketer friends of mine.
Yeah. They're fun.
That's where a lot. Yeah, they are really fun.
Well, you come in motivated because it's a short-term thing, Yeah. So it's like, all right, we're doing this starting now, So yeah. I think it's great.
I do too. I really can't speak highly enough about it. I mean, just across the board, like collaborating with people in this sort of way and being a part of groups, whether it's networking groups or masterminds or whatever, like that has been like invaluable to me as a human being, honestly.
Yeah.
Over the years, I've made really close friends. I've made amazing business connections through it. I've definitely gotten better at what I do because of it. So I would just encourage indies to like think about ways that they can tap into that. And I also want to mention to keep your eyes out for some of the stuff that we're going to be doing over Black Friday, not to tease it too much, but we've got some ideas. We've got some things coming up that are sort of centered on this topic. So that if it sounded interesting to you, we are going to be having some workshops around this related to Indie Pro Annual. And, these workshops are going to be coming up into 2021 and hopefully kind of teeing you guys up for thinking this way and making it the best year ever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so if you keep an eye out, this podcast is coming out again a couple days before Black Friday, and it's going to be announced on Black Friday. So keep your eye out for it. I've seen more details about this workshop, and I'm super stoked on it. And there may be a celebrity cameo. Circa may be involved. Everybody rush over.
Don't tell him we told you.
Yeah, exactly. Don't tell Cirque. It's a secret.
He doesn't know about it yet.
Well, he's going to know once this goes live.
Yeah.
But that'll definitely give you a kickstart. I know that's going to give you like a 2-year plan. It's going to be amazing. Okay. So just keep an eye out for it if it's something that sounds great to you. Otherwise, there's just madness happening at Indepreneur for Black Friday. We're not doing any of our standard stuff. There's going to be a lot of cool things. So just keep your eye out. Obviously, we've got this, workshop idea being released on Friday. And then a couple days later, we'll have even more to roll out for Cyber Monday. So keep your eyes out. Next week, Jack and I are going to take a little break.
We need to get out of the madness of Black Friday.
For gasp. I mean, we want everybody to fully digest their turkey. And we are going to reset our brains so that we can come back from Black Friday after it's been melted. Because obviously, you know us, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, not only are we working on Indepreneur stuff, but we're working on our own stuff. And Jack's working on IndieX stuff. And we're just working on so many things. So we are going to take a break next week. But when we come back, we have some really cool stuff. And I think it's time for us to be looking forward into 2021 and really figuring out how we're going to make it badass. So I'm stoked for that.
I'm really excited too. I think we're going to tee up a really fun December on Creative Juice, just kind of to kick everybody into the butt into 2021. I think we all could use that. Get us out of 2020 and charge forward into the new year strong. So I'm super excited.
So Jack is going to slap you across the face in December, and I'm going to bring holiday cheer.
Yep. Good cop, bad cop on the podcast.
All day long. December
always.
Just makes me so cheerful. So I will just bring the cheer.
I can't wait. So excited.
All right. So that's all for this episode. Keep an eye out for those Black Friday deals. Hopefully you're also running your own. And we will see you on the next episode of Creative Juice.
Peace out.